if they're not going to do it, then nobody is going to do it, right? 70% of the food is coming from there. They have such a big influence on what people buy through promotions, through recipe booklets. It's just where people find their inspiration for what they're going to eat that day. So yeah, we can have government campaigns, we can have NGOs doing stuff, and that's all important. But yeah, the retailers have an essential role.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the New Food Hub podcast, where you can discover the future of food. In each episode, we'll be chatting with industry experts to provide you with actionable insights on the latest innovations and trends in the alternative protein space. Created to help retailers, multinational food brands, and traditional meat and dairy producers to stay ahead in the rapidly evolving market with practical and honest advice. Tune in to get questions answered, build your knowledge, and join the movement towards a more sustainable food system. In this series, we'll be navigating the future of alternative proteins, sharing insights on how to prepare ourselves and our businesses for a more sustainable food future. Today, we'll be discussing plant-based retail, looking at how retailers can influence purchasing decisions, and we'll also be looking at the role of the protein tracker. Our guest, Martine van Haperen, an expert in food industry and food service for ProVeg Netherlands, has experience working in the plant-based sector for more than 8 years. Along with her team at ProVeg Netherlands, she's helping to spearhead the Protein Tracker initiative, supporting retailers and food service venues to rebalance their protein offerings. So let's go and say hello. Hi Martine, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So let's start by looking at how plant-based foods are faring right now. How would you describe the current retail landscape for plant-based foods?
Yeah, so we've come a long way. I mean, I've been vegan for more than 10 years now, and compared to what we have now with what we had back then, we have a lot of meat alternatives and dairy alternatives, and the candy aisle is also starting to look more and more plant-based, so that's absolutely great. But there are still some categories that could use some work, like ready meals. There's not that many options yet. It's getting more, but it's not really that big yet. And also like the bakery aisle, for instance, almost everything there is still made with butter and eggs and stuff. So yes, there's still more work to be done, I think.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And with all this in mind, then, so we know the main drivers for kind of increased plant-based eating at the moment. What's holding some consumers back from eating plant-based? Why aren't all people keen to eat more plant-based foods?
Yeah, yeah, that's a question we've asked as well. In the Netherlands, we've done a study where we had a survey asking people if they were open to plant-based food and if they thought the food system should be more plant-based. And two-thirds of people answered that they thought it should be. So people are open to it, and they also want companies to change their ingredients to use more plant-based ingredients and stuff. But the food system as a whole still sort of emanates that eating meat and eating animal products is the norm. And I think people are very sensitive to that. And when they are as a citizen, sort of, they feel like plant-based is more important and it's good for the environment. But as consumers, when they are in the supermarket or in a restaurant, it's still very difficult for them to sort of deviate from the norm and choose those plant-based products. So I think that's a big part of why people are still not choosing plant-based as much as we'd expect them to, based on the values that they communicate in surveys.
Interesting. How then can we kind of bridge this gap? How can retailers better understand and cater to these consumers?
Yeah, so I think it takes a little bit of bravery for the retailers as well. They need to start changing the norm. And that's, of course, a little bit sensitive. They might experience some resistance, but it's good to know that a large segment of consumers, the majority, is actually in favor of it. So we need to start slowly. We can't change it overnight, but slowly taking steps to change the food system, change the food environment to a place that sort of shows people like plant-based is what's good, it's normal, you can do it, everybody is doing it.
Yeah, thank you. And data shows that most consumers buy the majority of their food and drink from supermarkets. With this in mind, what is the role of retailers in making, healthier and more sustainable food and drink more accessible to consumers. Do you think that retailers kind of have a certain level of responsibility to steer consumers towards healthier and more sustainable foods?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if they're not going to do it, then nobody is going to do it, right? Like you say, 70% of the food is coming from there. And they have such a big influence on what people buy through promotions, through recipe booklets. It's just where people find their inspiration for what they're gonna eat that day. So yeah, we can have government campaigns, we can have NGOs doing stuff, and that's all important. But yeah, the retailers have an essential role.
Absolutely. Now, looking at the protein tracker, your team have been working really hard on this initiative for some time now. Could you explain to our listeners how it works and why it's valuable for both retailers and consumers?
Yeah, yeah. So in the Netherlands, we saw retailers starting to set protein goals, and the government also has a protein goal. Right now, our protein split is 40% plant-based and 60% animal-based. And the government has said that it needs to become a 50-50 split. And most retailers are now on a 60-40 split the other way around. So 60% plant-based and 40% animal-based by 2030. And we thought that's great, right? That's a really important development. But how will we actually know what's happening and if retailers are actually achieving this goal? So that's why, in collaboration with the Green Protein Alliance and a few other organizations and the supermarkets themselves, we started developing the protein tracker, which is a method for supermarkets to actually measure how much protein, animal protein and plant-based protein, they are selling to their consumers. And it's also split up in different categories, so it gives them a lot of insight in where their plant-based and animal protein sales are coming from, which means they're actually, yeah, it's a useful tracking method for them that they can also use to formulate their policy on this topic.
As you mentioned, more retailers, especially around Europe, are now starting to track their protein split and rebalance their protein levels. What can retailers gain from, protein tracking and rebalancing? What's in it for them?
Well, I think they have sustainability goals. So this is one of their major things that they need to do. The most CO2 emissions from supermarkets are coming from animal-based protein sales, especially meat, but also dairy and cheese and stuff. So yeah, this is what they need to do to start achieving their climate goals, their sustainability goals. And also for their public perception, it's of course important that they can show that they're working on this.
Yeah, positive brand recognition is really important these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now we've discussed how increasing the ratio of plant-based foods is a key method for encouraging plant-based uptake, but what are other ways that retailers can shape plant-rich food trends?
Well, there's all kinds of ways they can do it. Yeah, so one thing with the consumer profiling, I think we see that sustainability is still a big topic when we communicate about the importance of plant-based food. But actually, we know from surveys that people are maybe not as motivated by climate change as we think they might be. And topics like biodiversity, for instance, especially among right-leaning consumers, is a very important topic for them. So those are things we can take into account in the communication about it. And also health, for instance, is still a very important topic. And we can only do so much by communicating and trying to inspire consumers to change their food ways. Like I said before, the food environment is really important. And that's, I think, where most of the change in the upcoming years is going to come from. So things like how do you organize your shelves in the supermarket? Where are plant-based products placed compared to animal products? Pricing strategy. Is there price parity for animal and plant-based products? Or maybe plant-based products are even a little bit offered a little bit cheaper. That would be a very important thing. That's still a major obstacle for consumers. Other things they can do is just inconspicuously changing the ingredients of foods. We see this a lot in the Netherlands right now. The cookie aisle, for instance, is quickly becoming more plant-based just because butter and eggs are being removed from products and they still taste the same. They're still really good. But it's not communicated strongly. it's only on the back of the pack that you can see that the ingredients have changed, and vegan consumers will still find those products. But for the regular consumer, it's just the cookie that they've always bought. And so that's the kind of things we're seeing right now, that retailers are taking advantage of the public support for plant-based products to sort of quietly change over their offerings. Hybrid food is also an example of that. Sometimes it's called blended, sometimes it's called hybrid. So I think in English it's more often called blended, when you add plant-based ingredients to, for instance, a meat burger or a meat sausage, or even dairy cheese or milk combined with plant-based ingredients. And I think that's another big change that we'll see in the coming years, that we're getting more and more of these products, and they'll also be introduced quietly for most of the time, because consumers are not really interested in that type of product, but they're okay buying it if it's offered to them in an attractive way. And the attractive way is not by shouting off the roof that it's a blended product, but rather emphasizing qualities like how tasty it is, how easy it is to use, maybe the high protein content, etc., etc. So those are all really important things that retailers can start doing to start shifting the protein split.
Taking this further, what are some of the best merchandising and marketing strategies that you've recently seen for plant-based foods?
So what we're seeing right now is retailers are sort of moving away from vegan and moving into emphasizing plant-based, or even emphasizing other qualities of that product. So we know from research that the flavor, the origin, the texture, and the appearance of the product are all much more important than whether it's an animal or a plant-based product. There's a specific small segment of consumers that are really looking for the plant-based food and only buying those. But most consumers just want a tasty product, and it doesn't matter that much if it's plant-based or not. So we see, for instance, Albert Heijn in the Netherlands, they've changed their vegan range to Albert Heijn Terra, which is subtly promoted as plant-based. But also other retailers are just, like I said, changing over ingredients, or offering new products like a ready meal, which is just being promoted as like a Italian pasta with lentils, for instance. And then the fact that it's a plant-based product is only visible back of pack or with a very small logo. So it's a plant-based food, but it's not branded and marketed at you as like, hey, this is plant-based, buy me because I'm plant-based.
Interesting. So we've talked a lot about the current market and methods of increasing plant-based purchases. But now let's bring this conversation a bit closer to the retailers. What are the biggest challenges that retailers face in selling alternative proteins, and how can they overcome these?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is the resistance from that segment of consumers who are not really open to plant-based, and who are, yeah, resistant, and can get a little bit annoyed, or even aggressive when they see that products are being changed over, and when supermarkets are promoting plant-based options. But it's good to realize that's only a very small segment of consumers, and most consumers are actually in favor of it, but it's a silent majority. So and also when people start experiencing that the plant-based food actually tastes good, the resistance will also become less. So I think that's right now a big obstacle, but it's not something that we can't overcome. One of the things we see with this resistance is that if plant-based is communicated strongly on the package, that can bring a lot of resistance from people. So that's why I usually recommend make it a little bit more subtle that the product is plant-based. And if you still want to inspire consumers, then it's better to do it via non-packaging routes. For instance, in the recipe leaflet that you provide, or maybe with a sign in store citing some sustainability or biodiversity benefits, for instance. But on the packaging itself, where the consumer is actually choosing the product, it's best not to be too blunt with your plant-based communication, because that can turn some people off.
Yeah. Yeah, because plant-based consumers will always find plant-based products, so there won't ever be an
Yeah.
issue with that.
Yeah, your very motivated vegan consumer will always find the product. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What emerging technologies or trends do you think will shape the future of alternative protein sales in retail?
I think hybrid is a very important one. We're already seeing it a little bit uh, in the Netherlands now, especially with meat products. Lots of hybrid sausages with just a small percentage of plant-based ingredients added are being introduced. But also a little bit more overt products like a mincemeat mix with 40% pea protein in it. And I'm expecting to see also plant-based dairy, for instance, cheese mixed with legumes or yogurt mixed with oat yogurt, for instance. So that's a big one. And in the bakery aisle, we're also slowly starting to see ingredients being substituted.
We've got a brand in the UK called Smug, and
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, they're half dairy, half oat milk in cheese.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm interested to see how that goes, because that's like an overt
Mm,
blended product. Whereas some options might be a little bit more subtle in their
yeah.
communication. For instance, if you have a strawberry yogurt, you could add, it's already a partially plant-based ingredient. So it's more easy to add something without having to communicate it very strongly. Or, a yogurt snack which already has like little oat flakes in it, you might be able to add a bit more oat yogurt in there without actually having to be very, very strong in your communication about it. So we'll see. I think those types of things might start happening more as the supermarkets are becoming more active in influencing their protein split.
Yeah, completely. Um, Now, what steps do you think that retailers and brands can take today to align their alternative protein strategies with global sustainability and public health goals?
So for the health goals, it's important that the alternatives are actually nutritious. We've seen quite a lot of steps with that. Plant-based alternatives used to be quite high in salt, for instance, and the protein quality isn't always up to spec. But we're really seeing manufacturers starting to take steps with that and aligning their products with international health guidelines. So that's really a good thing. And also in the recent study that ProVeg did, the Dutch meat alternatives actually came out as the best, most healthy and nutritious of all the 11 countries that were tested. So I'm really happy with that. And I think we have national guidelines here for the nutrition of plant-based alternatives, and I think that really contributed. So that's an important thing.
Now we're almost at the end of our chat, but I'd love to just get a last bit of guidance from you. What's one key takeaway that you would like our listeners to remember from our discussion today?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to realize that just inspiring consumers isn't going to do enough. We really need to start changing the food environment, changing the food system. So people get more of the feeling that plant-based is actually the new norm, and that will start getting them to change over. And in addition to that, we can inspire them with leaflets and stuff, but really changing the environment and gradually nudging them towards a more plant-based diet is what's going to make the big change.
100%. And finally, Martine, looking ahead, what excites you most about the current retail landscape for alternative proteins?
Yeah, so I think all those new products that we're seeing now with the hybrid and with new bakery items, also the candy aisle, which is now for years it was mostly gelatin, and we see the little plant-based logos and signs coming up everywhere. I think that's a really good example of how the whole supermarket could be within a couple of years. So I'm really excited for that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Martine, for our conversation today. Retailers in the Netherlands and beyond can get in touch with Martine and her team through the ProVeg Netherlands website or her email address, which I'll pop in the episode show notes. And for more support and content, please head over to the New Food Hub and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much, Martine.
Thank you.